Alright, he develops his bishop. Let's simply develop our knight. And then he plays this a5 weird move. I'll just develop normally. And now I have two of my pieces out. And he develops his knight, and already this is not good for him. So I'm going to play knight f6, and I'm immediately targeting his pawn. Now he guard the pawn, but what I'm going to do here is play knight g4, and I'm already threatening his f-pawn. Now he castles his king, thinks he's safe, but remember, I'm attacking the pawn 2 times. He's only guarding it 2 times. So once I play queen h4, I'm now attacking this pawn 3 times, and I'm threatening a checkmate. So he had to play h6 to not get checkmated, but now we take on f2, we're attacking his queen, and he has to sack his rook, and once we take, we're just winning. Okay, he moves his queen out the way. Now we're just trying to close this game. I'm going to simply play d6 in this position, just preparing to get my bishop out. Okay, he plays bishop to g5. He's trying to develop quickly, but I want to set up a trap to sack my bishop. So to make this work, I need to chase this bishop away. Now, once he moves the bishop, here's my trap. I'm going to play queen to h4, and his king is basically trapped in the corner. Now, he plays bishop to e1. That's a nice move. I can't sack my bishop as yet because I'm going to lose the queen. So I'm going to pull my queen back to h5 with the same idea of sacking the bishop. Now that he develops his knight, now I'm going to sack the bishop. His pawn takes, my queen takes, and that's going to be a checkmate. So let's take here. And then once he takes, that's just a checkmate. Okay, so we develop the knight and hit the pawn. He defends it. We go right in the Italian game. And then this guy plays h6. He wants to prevent knight g5. But let's get our king out the center first. And then d6 was played. I'll simply develop my knight normally. And if you notice, he's now pinning my knight to my queen. I want to set up the legal trap, but if I take on e5, his knight is going to take, and it doesn't work. Which is why I'm going to play h3 first. And then if he pulls back the bishop, okay, he didn't pull back the bishop. So let's just take here. Threatening a mate. He develops his knight to defend the mate, so I'll just play d3 here and develop normally. Bishop e7 was played. I want to set up another trap. Now notice, I think he's trying to castle on the next move, so I'm gonna put my queen here and attack this g7 pawn. So if he doesn't do anything, I'll take the pawn, and then he castles right into it. Now notice how my queen is x-raying this pawn on g7, so I'm now able to play bishop takes h6, and his pawn is not able to take, and I'm threatening a checkmate on g7. Now he moved his knight out the way. He is attacking my queen, and he's also preventing the mate. But in this position, I'll simply move my queen to g4. His knight is still under attack, and my bishop is safe. He then plays g6, thinking he's protecting his knight, but little does he know that it blunders a pawn. Why? Pinned pieces does not protect. So I'm now able to take on g6, checking the king. He's not able to take my queen because my bishop pins his pawn. So he has to move his king to h8, and now I'm able to take his knight for free, and he has to get checkmate in the next few moves. He plays rook to g8, basically speeds up the process, because once I play bishop to f8, that's a checkmate. Okay, let's defend our pawn first. This is the 2 knights game. I'm going to develop my bishop. And then after d3, I'm going to play d6 to get this bishop out. He plays g3, and I'll simply pin his knight to his queen. And then I'm going to go queen to d7, controlling this h3 square. Now, in this position, I'll play knight d4, applying some pressure to his pinned knight. And the whole idea of me playing queen d7 was to prevent h3. So he still plays h3, and we're just going to take the free pawn. Okay, let's take here. Now, he has to be careful not to lose this g3 pawn, by the way, because notice how my bishop is on the same diagonal as his king, which he missed. So we're going to be able to take the g3 pawn, and he's not able to take back. Okay, now that he moved his king, he wants to fork here, and I'm going to simply take on f2, because if he forks here, he's going to get mate on h3. So he needs to sack his rook before he forks, but he basically missed both of them, so that's a checkmate. Here, let's attack the pawn. He guards it. Now we're in the Italian game. And then he plays bishop to c5. Here I'm just going to castle my king as quickly as I can. He develops his knight. Now I'm going to play d3 to guard my pawn. And then he plays knight to d4. This is already a mistake because it moves the same piece more than once in the opening. And the knight was guarding this pawn. So once I take, I'm already threatening this, and I'm ahead by a pawn. He castles his king. Now I'm going to develop my bishop, pinning his knight to his queen. He attacks my bishop. Let's just pull the bishop back. That's fine. He attacks the bishop again. Let's pull the bishop back again. And then he puts his knight here, just gifting me a knight. This is crazy. Now, I'm attacking this square 3 times, and he's only guarding it twice. So he's going to be in some trouble. But here's what I'm going to do. This should be a mate. He takes, trying to win my rook. But let's take on f7 with a check. I think he has to give up his rook in this position. Either way, he's getting checkmated. If he takes with the rook, I takes, and that leads to mate after knight g3. And if he moves his king, queen takes h6 is a checkmate. Well, he decides to move the king, but this is checkmate in two moves. I'm going to play queen check, the king has to go back, queen takes pawn is a checkmate. So let's check. The king goes back, and that's a checkmate. Okay, everybody knows this. We attack the pawn, we join the Italian game. He plays the two knight defense. We jump in the Italian. Oh, this is a nice line. Now, it's incorrect to take with the knight because he's going to play here and fork. And if we play knight here, the queen comes here and we're going to lose. So it's usually best to play bishop takes in these types of position. It forces the king to move. And then only when the king moves, now we play the move d3. It attacks his knight, but I want you to notice how he's not able to take the knight because once my bishop takes, it skewers his queen and his king. So now he has to move his knight out the way. He plays h6 to attack my knight, but I'll simply take his knight. It's the same story. He's not able, well, he did take my knight, but once I take here, I skewer his king and his queen, and he resigns. Normal development, protect our pawn. He's in the Italian game. We're going for the two knights defense. He plays d3. I'm going to develop my bishop here, just developing my pieces. He plays h3. I guess he doesn't want me to pin, but that's fine. Let's play d6. The goal is just to develop. Okay, he plays c3. I'm going to put my bishop here, just developing. He takes, let's take back. And then he puts his queen here. This is an interesting move because it attacks this and this at the same time. But I don't have an issue with that. I'm going to put my queen here, guarding this pawn. Because if he takes this pawn, I play this move. His queen now has to move, and once I castle my king, I have a lead in development. He moves his queen again, and because my development is complete, I'm going to start my attack. I'm going to start by putting my knight here, heading towards these squares. Okay, he attacks my bishop. Let's just pull it back first. Okay, he castles his king. What I'm going to do here, I'm going to sacrifice my rook on f3, because notice how exposed his king is now. And once his king is this exposed, we should be able to go for mate. First, I'm going to start with swinging over my rook. I'm trying to bring more pieces to his king. Okay, he pulls his queen back, trying to defend. Okay, let's keep bringing pieces over. I'm going to put my queen here, transferring more pieces to his king. Now let's get our queen here. Okay, he's in big trouble. He puts his king there defending the pawn, but I'm going to put my knight here. And there's no way to prevent me from taking this pawn, which means that's checkmate in the next two moves. Putting the rook there doesn't help because once he puts the rook there, now the rook is no longer guarding this pawn, which means that's just a checkmate. For 1548, he's playing the Scandinavian defense. Let's take, and we pull the queen out, and now we're going to go knight c3, hit the queen. a5 is the correct score for the queen, but let's go d4 and just keep our development. Now c3 was played. What I'm going to do now is simply develop my bishop, just regular normal development move. And then he plays e6. Let's just keep developing. Knight goes to f3, and he develops his bishop to b4. Now notice his bishop is attacking my knight twice, so let's just play bishop d2 and guard it. He took, that's bad. Don't be moving the same pieces more than once. Let's just take. Notice once I castled, my development is complete. He still has pieces on the background, so it gives me time to set up an attack. So here's where I'm going to set up my attack. I'm actually predicting his king castling, and I'm sacrificing a bishop on h6. But here's where I'm going to set this up. First, I'm going to pull my bishop back to d3 because I'm assuming that he's going to castle, which he did. Now, my bishop is pointing towards his king. Now I'm going to pull my dark squared bishop to d2. Now I have two bishops pointing towards his king. Now, the next thing that I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to put my bishop here, pinning his knight to his queen. He puts his knight there to guard it. And then now I'm going to put my queen on d2 and create a battery. So he plays a5. He's pushing his pawns on the queen side. I have 1, 2, 3 pieces in the attack. Now I'm going to transfer my queen towards his king side to attack that pawn. So I'm going to go queen f4. And then he plays h6. Here's the sacrifice that I was telling you guys about. So let's sacrifice on h6. And then once he takes, notice how his king is all exposed. So he's going to get checkmated very soon or lose some material. Now, he decided to move his knight to e4. It's like a desperate move, but I'm just going to take the knight on e4, and I'm still threatening checkmate here. Now, it did give him the chance to play g5, but this is at least winning me a queen. The first thing I'm going to do is give a check on g6. His king is then forced to move to h8, and that's when I'm going to play knight g5. Now I'm threatening to checkmate on h7. So how is he going to guard it? He plays queen to e7, but that's fine. All I'm going to do here is actually just get my rook in the game. I don't mind if he takes my bishop, because my plan is to do a rook lift and get even more pieces in the attack. Let's see how he defends. He took the bishop. We saw this. Let's just take back. And once the rook goes to h4, which is here, he's going to get checkmated or losing the queen. He blocks with his knight, but I'm simply going to take his knight. His queen has to take, and that's going to be a checkmate. So let's grab the knight. Queen had to take, and that's a checkmate. Follow for Scandinavian defense. Let's grab this and develop the knight, hit the queen. Okay, he pulls the queen all the way back. I don't know why these lower rated guy loves the Scandi, but let's just play d4 here and develop our pieces. He develops his knight. I'll also develop my knight, and it's just regular development here. Pawn b6, he's trying to develop his bishop. Let's go bishop c4, and then he develops the bishop, and I'm going to start by playing queen to e2 in this position. I like to put my queen on the same line as the opponent's king. And then he plays e6. I'm thinking of knight e5 and just sacrificing here, to be honest. Knight e5 is queen could take, and then I could take and hit the rook, and then it's already a complex position. But before we start trying to win quickly, let's get our king out the center. But that's an idea that I have. He develops his bishop. I'm also going to develop my bishop. Now all my pieces are out. He castles his king. Now I'm going to put my rook on the same line as his queen. Okay, this is his first mistake, giving up a bishop for a knight. Let me take with the queen, and now I'm attacking his rook. And because of that mistake that he made, I'm now able to start an attack on his king, because he doesn't have a light squared bishop. First, I'm going to pull my bishop to d3, pointing it towards this weak h7 pawn. And now he moves his knight. He's trying to go for a trade, but instead of immediately trading, I'm going to leave my bishop hanging, and I'm actually going to play the move queen to h5, because I'm currently threatening a checkmate. He plays g6 to prevent the mate. Now, keep in mind, if I just move my queen, I'm gonna lose my bishop. So first I'm gonna take his bishop, attacking his queen. And then once he takes, I'm gonna go queen to h6, and my goal is to target this weak h7 pawn. Okay, he took, let's just take back. This is the only piece that is not doing anything, so let's get it in the game. And now I'm gonna do what we call a rook lift, where we move the rook forward with the whole idea of swinging it over. And again, it's like hacking a file. He takes. Before I take back, I'm going to play rook h3. Now I'm threatening a checkmate. He plays knight f6 to guard the mate. Now the knight is the only defender of the h7 square. So if I could figure out a way to get rid of his knight, that would be a checkmate. So I'm going to start by playing the move pawn to g4. Yes, I'm moving pawns in front of my king, but if I'm able to chase that knight away, that would be a checkmate. He plays pawn to g5, which is just bad. This is going to lead to a mate. Because notice what happens. He's trying to prevent my pawn from going to g4, but while doing that, he opens this diagonal for my bishop. So now I'm attacking this h7 pawn 3 times, and he's only guarding it once. So to do the checkmate, I'm just going to take on h7 check. If he moves the king, that's going to lead to a mate, and if he takes with the knight, that's just a checkmate. He moves his king out the way, and I already have checkmate in 2 moves here. I'm going to start by simply moving my bishop out the way, and that's a check. His king then has to take the bishop, and then queen to h8 is a checkmate. Follow the Scandinavian defense. Alright, let's take, pull that queen out, and then I'm gonna develop my knight and attack the queen. Again, none of these checks works. We just need to develop and block the check. He plays g6. Let's just keep developing first. And now that the king is out the center of the board, we're going to use this time to punish him for bringing his queen out early. He gave up his bishop for a knight, which is also a bad move. Let's just take with the d pawn, so that way our bishop gets good development. He pulls the queen back. Now he wants to trade, but we're not going to be trading that queen. We're going to be winning that queen. So let's play bishop to d3. He plays f6, trying to prevent my knight from going here. Let's play queen to e2. I'm putting my queen on the same line as his king. And once he plays e5, I'm actually able to sacrifice my knight, because once he takes, my queen is able to take, which checks his king and attack his rook at the same time. That's a fork. And now we grab his rook. We didn't win his queen, but he's definitely going to get checkmated here. He pulls his queen back. First, I'm going to develop my bishop, covering these squares around the king. And I'm going to use the time to bring my rooks in the game. So now we're definitely going for checkmate. He moves his king over, and look at this move that I'm about to play. I'm going to play bishop to h6 right here. Check. His knight is not able to take due to the pin. His queen has to block, and once his queen blocks, that's just a checkmate. Don't bring your queen out. The Scandinavian defense. Okay, let's take, pull the queen out, then develop the knight, force the queen to move. All of these checks usually just doesn't work. Let's just block with the bishop. And once he develops his knight, I'll immediately play d4 because it threatens to fork his queen and his knight. And then he plays bishop to d7. And this, guys, is why you don't bring your queen out too early. He moves his queen out the way. I could just take the knight if I want to. But again, we have to punish him for bringing the queen out early. So I'm going to play the move knight b5. Now his knight is under attack and he's about to get forked. He gave a check, but that did not help him because I'm simply going to play the move bishop to d2. Now his knight is under attack, he's going to get forked, and his queen is under attack. Okay, he moves his queen out the way. Okay, before we give this check or take the knight, let's attack the queen again, so that way we get free development for our bishop. And once he checks, I'm going to play c3. I don't mind if he takes, because rook b1 gets even more pieces in the game. Okay, he took. So before I fork, I'm going to take the knight, because if he takes with the bishop, that's actually a checkmate. He decided not to take with the bishop, but this should still be losing for him. Now here's what I'm going to do. Before I even take this free bishop or take the pawn, I'm going to start by attacking his queen, forcing his queen to move again, lining up my rook on the same line as this weak b7 pawn. And then once he takes, now I'm looking for some checkmates. Now keep in mind that I could simply take here and argue that I'm ahead by a piece, but because I'm going for mate, I'm going to take on b7, checking his king, and once his king takes, it's on the same line as my rook. So now we're able to do discovered attacks. Before I use the discovered attack, I'm going to start by playing bishop to c6, checking his king. The king still has to move. He moves his king to c8, and then once I play knight takes a7, the only reason why that is not a checkmate is because his queen has to take, and I'm just winning his queen. Do not bring your queen out too early. Now we grab the queen, and I'm also threatening a checkmate here. He develops his knight, but that's a checkmate, but that's also a checkmate. For the Scandinavian defense. Okay, let's take, pull his queen out, then develop our knight, gain a tempo on the queen. He puts the queen on a5, which is the correct square for the queen, but I like to play b4 here and then just sacrifice a pawn because I like to have them keep moving the queen over and over. That's how we punish them. And then I'm going to start by playing rook to b1, which immediately attacks the queen, forcing the queen to keep moving. He moves the queen. I'm forcing his queen to move while I'm developing my pieces. He moves the queen again. I'm going to play rook to b5, forcing him to make even more queen moves. Notice how his queen is on the same diagonal as my bishop. That's never a good sign. But let's just develop our bishop first, targeting this weak f7 pawn. He moves his queen out the way. He's currently targeting my bishop on c4, and he's targeting my pawn on g2. But once I play the move bishop to d5, he just has to keep moving his queen. Now he moves his queen to g6, but what I'm going to do here is simply develop my knight. I don't care if he takes this pawn, because now he may lose his queen. I want you guys to notice how his queen is on the same diagonal as my bishop. So all I need to do is move my knight out the way, and his queen is under attack, and I'm also targeting f7 twice. Once he moves the queen, I'll take on f7, his king has to move and I'll mate him. He moves his queen out of the way. So again, if I take here, I'm just winning a rook, but we're going for checkmate. So let's play bishop takes. His king has to move. He moves his king out of the way. Let's play rook here, checking his king, and he has to block the check. Now I'm just trying to find the check that leads to mate. Now keep in mind, if I could get my knight to c6, that would be a mate. So how do we prepare this? Let me start by playing queen to f3. He develops his knight, which immediately attacks my rook. And so I have two options here. I could just move my rook and just attack his queen. But because this guy's 900, I'm sure I could get away with just playing queen to a6. And he's going to just grab the queen. I knew he would have grabbed the queen. And remember I told you guys that the pawn is guarding the mate. So once I play knight c6, that's just a checkmate. The Scandinavian defense. Let's take, pulling out the queen, then develop to gain a tempo on the queen. This check is only helping me to develop my bishop, and once he puts his bishop here, I'm going to play d4, forcing him to move his queen even more. And he moves the queen, and then I'm going to play d5. Notice how many times he's moving the queen. This is why you don't bring your queen out too early, because all I'm doing is developing, and all he's doing is moving his queen. He took, I take, my development is basically complete, and all he has to show are queen moves. So first I'm going to castle, and then once I castle, I'm going to punish him for bringing his queen out too early. He plays knight to a6. The punishment starts with bishop f4, forcing him to move the queen even more times. He moves the queen. I know he wants to castle on the queen side, so I'm going to play queen to d4, which means if he castles, I'm able to win his a7 pawn. Well, he did castle, so that's just a free pawn. He's now trying to run away with his king, but that leaves this pawn unprotected. So let's grab the pawn. And once he moves the knight, this is just a checkmate in 2 moves. I'm going to check the king here. His king is forced to go to c8, and then queen takes c7 is a checkmate. So let's give a check. King has to move, and that's a checkmate. Follow from the Scandinavian defense. All right, let's take, pulling out the queen. He didn't decide to take with the queen, so let's develop our knight, and then after he took with his knight, I'm going to develop my bishop, adding some attackers to his knight. He then played e6 to guard the knight, so let's develop normally. He develops his bishop. Let's just go d4 in this position, controlling the center. And then after h6, I'll simply castle my king. He also castles his king. And how I want to start my attack is by lining up my pieces towards his king. So I'm actually going to just pull my bishop back here. So that way my bishop points towards his king. This bishop is also pointing towards his king. Let me just get rid of this knight so that way my dark squared bishop gets to do this. And once I play this, look at this. This is a very nice pattern that you guys should use. The bishop points towards the king. The queen and the bishop has a battery pointing towards the king. I'm actually able to sacrifice my bishop here. He basically pre-moved it, but once I play queen takes, it's not completely, well, it wasn't completely winning, but it was hard to defend. This guy just proved that that's just a checkmate. The Scandinavian defense. I like to take with the idea of pulling out the queen and then develop my knight to gain a tempo on the queen. Now, once the queen goes back, I'll develop my bishop. Notice how it points towards this very weak pawn. And then he develops his knight. I'll also develop my knight. I'm just preparing to castle, play d4. He develops his knight. Now I'm going to play d4, controlling the center. And he plays e6. It blocks his bishop in though, but let's just castle our king. He got his bishop out. Let me get my bishop out as well. I'm now pinning his knight. Giving up the bishop for a knight is also a mistake, but let's just take. He castles his king. And already I'm going to set up a very nice idea that you guys could use in your game. Now first, it starts with putting the bishop on d3. Because once we're trying to attack, we want to ensure that we're pointing pieces towards their king. Now I'm going to play queen d2. Now look on my pieces. They're all pointing towards his king. He's not paying attention to that. So now I'm going to maneuver my queen to his king side. I'm trying to checkmate on the square, but the knight is guarding it. So now that he plays h6, the whole idea is to sacrifice the bishop on h6. It exposes his king. Notice once I take, his king is exposed. I am down by a piece, but I have 3 pieces in the attack, and he doesn't have a lot of pieces defending. He moves his rook out the way, but I'm going to simply put my knight here. I'm bringing more pieces in the attack. He pulls his knight back, but this is already a forced checkmate. I'm going to check here. If his knight takes, I check, king over queen takes his mate. And if he moves the king, knight takes is just a checkmate. He took with the knight, but I'm just going to check here. The king has to move, and that's a checkmate. Follow for more videos like these.